Namaskar, dear learners. I am Dr. Sumita Mishra, Dean, KIIT School of Management, back with you here again in the Swayam MOOC course titled Quantitative and Mixed Method Research. And we are today in the last and final week of this course, where we shall be individually summarizing our components that we have been teaching you through video segments and lectures in the past 7 weeks. It has been a great experience, dear learners, to engage with you through videos, through supplements, and by answering your queries. And in this week, we shall be looking at a snapshot of what we have been doing in the past weeks. Now, in this week, I will first touch upon the entire structure of the course, and I will also take the help of few doctoral dissertations to provide an application, a sense of what we have been talking about.
Now, going by brief outline of the course module, week 1 looked at introduction to research, types of research, stages of research problems. Week 2 looked at identification of research issues or problems. Week 3 spoke about research design and the sampling method. Week 4 was looking at measurement scales and data collection methods, both quantitative and qualitative. Week 5 and week 6 concentrated on concepts of hypothesis, hypothesis testing, and data analysis techniques which were quantitative in nature. Week 7 looked at data analysis techniques which were qualitative in nature. And now here we are in week 8, where we shall be motivating you to do a research project based on whatever learnings you have had in the course. So if I look at the weeks past, I will start with the first week and the video segment and supplement that I had uploaded for your use. So my video lecture concentrated on the types of research methods, research paradigms, and the need to conduct something that we understand as a Q-square method or a mixed method research. So typically, if I look at the research methods have broadly been categorized in 3 parts. One is exploratory, descriptive, and explanatory. Now, typically, if I look at the categorization of research methods, many authors have done their own categorizations, but these are very fundamental, very, very basic. And if I look at the questions which have been raised by our learners in these 7 weeks, they have also asked a similar question, that is this the only way of categorizing research methods? My answer is no. As I said before, authors have done their own categorization, but I will urge you to understand the fundamental basis on which you differentiate research methods. Now, the video segment has also concentrated on the paradigms of research. That when we look at the broad categorizations of what we use in research designs, in research methods, in research analysis, we basically talk about quantitative research and qualitative research. But once again, research is all about understanding your fundamentals. So fundamentally, my question in this video segment was that how did we arrive at something that we know today as quantitative research or qualitative research? Now, these were the genesis of 2 completely different paradigms of research, namely positivist and interpretive. So in this segment, we understood the meaning of the word paradigm, the meaning of the word ontology, meaning of the word epistemology, and the different ways in which you would conceptualize a phenomena if you were to take quantitative or qualitative research. Now, given the fact that these 2 frames of research are very, very divergent, what would urge a researcher to undertake a mixed method research design where you would rather amalgamate, coagulate, or mix these 2 different varieties of research to arrive at a single conclusion? Now, there have been multiple reasons which I had highlighted in my video segment, but I think the chief reason is the whole idea of maintaining internal and external validity of research, mixed method research designs are more credible and help you maintain both forms of validity. The video segment and the supplement has described what these two varieties of validity would mean and how a research would ensure that these are maintained. So, if we go back to the supplement, basically, the supplement it takes a reference from Arnold Bhattacharya's book, where he speaks about the cone of validity, that there are methods which will help you only maintain internal or only maintain external validity, but there are some methods which help you maintain both. And for this very purpose, if you undertake mixed method research design, you are able to view the same phenomena from two completely different paradigms, and that gives you a better understanding, better depth of the research that you are undertaking. But yes, in comparison to a single design to in comparison to a single method, the mixed method is 100 times more challenging. Now, week 2 concentrated on the review of literature. Review of literature is basically one of the most important aspects of research for two reasons. The first is every good research should be able to explain the word why. For example, let us say you are interested to do a research on a particular phenomena. You should be able to scientifically explain why is your interest in this area. And to do that, you need to do a thorough review of literature in that particular area to come to an understanding that whether this is the area that demands a research attention or not. Secondly, the review of literature also helps give credibility to your academic peers, acknowledgement to the extent work done by your academic peers, which is very, very important and which would also take care of issues which are so very prominent in research today, like plagiarism. Now, the video segment had talked about the dangers of plagiarism and what is meant by plagiarism and why this would happen in today's research domain. Now, basically, if I look at week 2 focused on the types of literature review. Now, broad categorizations of literature review can be thematic and chronological, but thematic and chronological literature review basically look at the structure in which the literature review is reported. But the three typologies of literature review are what is meant by systematic literature review or SLR, narratives, and the integrative literature review. Now, every literature review is done for the purpose of identifying research gaps, but very often researchers stumble when they identify research gaps, saying that they are not very sure about the kind of research gaps that they have come across, or they are confused with the mass of literature that they are reading through. So, in this segment, I had also identified the kinds of gaps that researchers should be careful to gauge or examine. Now, these gaps are basically theoretical, methodological, and contextual. Now, here I would be giving you some explanations from the dissertations of my doctoral scholars who completed their doctoral degree under my guidance. These examples will also help you understand the applicability of what has been taught during these video lectures or what has been written in the corresponding supplements. So now, moving ahead, I give you an example of what is meant by a chronological literature review from the doctoral dissertation of my research scholar whose degree has already been awarded. Her name is Swati Mishra, and she had done a doctoral research on the area of the influence of intrinsic motivation on employee retention in software companies. Now, she had conducted both types of literature reviews, thematic and chronological, but here I am giving an example of a chronological literature review. Basically, if I look at this table is summarizing the findings of the chronological literature review. Now, if you can remember what I had taught to you about chronological literature reviews, these reviews are done mainly to understand the growth and development of a research construct. So, her interest was in the domain of motivation. So she looked at the origin of motivation as a research construct and the kind of theories that have shaped this research construct from 1920 till 1985. Now, if you can see the table shares the prominent findings, the prominent theories, the authors of the theories, and the kind of motivators that they have identified. So, one reason was to do a chronological literature review for Dr. Swati was to understand that how many theories have actually focused on intrinsic motivators. Now, she found very few theories to be focusing on intrinsic motivators, and this is how they go. So, this example or this table is an example of a chronological literature review, and it is basically summarizing the growth, the theoretical foundations in her domain area of interest, which was basically motivation with a specific focus on intrinsic motivation. Now, coming to research gaps. Here also, I am taking an example from Swati's dissertation and explaining to you how research gaps were identified after the massive literature review that she had undertaken in the domain of motivation. Now, when I spoke of research gaps, I had clearly mentioned that theoretical research gaps are the most important. And without theoretical gaps, it will be difficult for you to justify the word why in your research statement or in your research problem. Now, these are some examples of how to identify theoretical gaps. Now, look at the research gaps that were identified by her. Maximum theories of motivation have given importance to extrinsic factors. So, what does that mean? That means that there is a chance for the researcher to look at intrinsic motivators or intrinsic factors which were not described by the theories. Just to clarify, extrinsic factors are external motivators and intrinsic factors are internal motivators. Now, in most cases, the organizations rely on the carrot and stick variety of incentive plans to provide extrinsic motivation. So, even though theories have focused on extrinsic motivators, the variety of extrinsic motivators have also been very limited in literature. Now, studies focusing on the relationship between intrinsic motivation, turnover intentions, and employee retention are sparse or few. Now, this is a direct theoretical gap because her research was on the influence of intrinsic motivators on employee retention. Now, if you want to study this and you find less of studies on this area, then that is a prominent theoretical research gap which will enable you to undertake a further research in this domain. Now, the last of the research gaps pertain to the cultural specificity of ideations and theories on motivation. The whole idea was that maximum developments on motivation had happened in the Western context. So, if you bring down these theories to the Indian, to the Asian, and to be specific to the Indian context, things may change. So, there is a dearth of studies which is looking at the cultural specificity of motivation theory. So, that was another theoretical gap that she identified. So, and if I look at week two ended the discussions, the research supplements, the video segments on the kind of research questions that you need to frame. Now, as I had talked in the video segment, I'm repeating again that research questions are very different from any question. So, research questions are the central questions that would guide your research, and they need to be free from any kind of researcher bias or assumptions. Now, you can take a look at these research questions which I have pulled out from the dissertation of Swati, and they can help you understand how research questions are framed in the first place. So, for example, let's look at these three questions. These three questions were the guiding questions that had guided her entire doctoral dissertation. What is the difference between groups of respondents based on personal demographic variables, that is, age, gender, and organizational tenure, and their corresponding preferences for intrinsic motivation? Now, the idea is that is there a difference in people based on demographic variables, and that is also specified like age, gender, and organizational tenure? given their preference for intrinsic motivators? Now, let's look at the second question. What is the difference, within brackets, if any, between groups of respondents based on personal demographic variables, that is age, gender, and organizational tenure and retention? Now, if I look at the word if any, please focus on this word in the research question. Now, that is taking care of the researcher bias. We do not know what the answer to this question would be without analyzing the data. That is the reason why if any has been quoted here. What is the effect, extent, or predictability of intrinsic motivation on employee retention of Indian Gen Y software professionals? So, these were the central research questions that were guiding her study, and you can see how these questions have been framed. Now, when I speak of research questions are framed using three words: what, why, and how. And time and again, I've reiterated to the fact that each of these varieties of research questions will have different methods of research to analyze the data. Now, moving ahead in week three, week three focused on sampling basically, and it had two parts to it. One was the quantitative sampling methods, and the other was the qualitative sampling method, which I had undertaken. Now, my video segment, had focused on the difference between sampling for quantitative and qualitative studies. I think researchers need to be very, very careful and conscious about this difference. And the biggest difference that I see here is that in a quantitative study, the sample size is preordained or predetermined, whereas in qualitative studies, you do not pre-estimate the sample size and you would continue sampling till the point of theoretical saturation. Now, basically, in this video segment, I had explained in detail what is meant by purposive sampling and what are the varieties of purposive sampling. If you look at the supplement to the video segment, this supplement has described all varieties of purposive sampling with examples. Now, from the qualitative purposive sampling, I had also spoken about mixed method sampling, where in a single research you can undertake more than one sampling technique. And how would you be doing that? So these were all discussed with examples in the video segment and the supplement. And in qualitative research, sampling would be determined by the point of theoretical saturation. So I think learners, you need to be very conscious of what this means. You need to constantly look at the video segment, or if not, to the supplement to understand what theoretical saturation means. Now, if I look at all of this, one of the reasons why quantitative studies are based on breadth of information, meaning you require more and more respondents in your sample, whereas qualitative research is based on the depth of information that you collect from a particular respondent. So when I look at quant studies, they will ask every respondent the same question, and they would get different answers or similar answers to the questions posed. But qualitative research depends on the kind of information or the depth of information that you get from a single respondent, and qualitative samples are generally small in comparison to quantitative samples. At the outset, I had also clearly mentioned that almost all qualitative samples are non-probabilistic in nature. And why? Now, when we look at the meaning of purposive sampling, I thought it's interesting to give you an example here. Now, this is an example that I take from another doctoral dissertation of a scholar of mine, Dr. Shraddha Padhi, and her thesis had looked at the influence of ethical values on software project performance. Now, what is the meaning of purposive sampling? Purposive sampling is very, very non-probabilistic in nature, and very deliberately respondents are selected into the sample with the explicit idea of augmenting the theoretical constructs or the theory that is used in the study. Now, here in her thesis, we have explained at three levels how we conducted the sampling. And whenever you are doing a non-probabilistic sampling, I think learners should understand that it is very, very important to explain what is the inclusion criteria, and more importantly, what is the exclusion criteria? That means how do you include a respondent, how do you exclude a respondent? But here you can see what we have done. The first is the organization. Organization, there are many organizations in India. Why did we select the organization that we had selected? Now, the reasons are clear that the organization was chosen for its thrust on projects. You need to go to a organization that is run on projects. So this organization at the time of the data collection had 500 ongoing projects in various accounts, and this had a strong adherence to the different codes of conduct that govern the project management standards. Now the next was project. So, how did we select the projects? The organization has 500 ongoing projects. So, out of these 500, what are the projects that we selected and why? So, basically, what I'm saying is, how are we excluding? How are we including? What is the rationale? That is how purposive sampling goes. So, we selected 150 triple platinum projects spread across 11 industry verticals. So what is the meaning of a triple platinum projects? These 150 triple platinum projects had a strong adherence to the ethical code of conduct, which was mentioned by the PMI or the Project Management Institute, and they followed the PMBOK guidelines. That is number one. These were some of the best projects of the company. Number two, they contributed maximum to the revenue base of the company. Number three. Now, the last is the project managers or the actual respondents of the study. How did we do that? Every project had many, many project managers. So, if we say that a project was headed by a project manager, so we had 150 project managers to choose from. And the final selection was to be made from a target population of 150 project managers. And we conducted qualitative research interviews with them till the point of theoretical saturation. So this is the meaning of purposive sampling, and this is how detailed this purposive sampling can be, whereby a researcher needs to explain how they have gone about including or excluding respondents from the sample. Now, week 4 concentrated on qualitative methods of data collection. Now, here, learners, I would like to clarify that qualitative methods of data collection are many, but I concentrated on the most important of them all, which were the qualitative research interviews, given the paucity or shortage of time that we had. Now, the video segment basically concentrated on the types of interviews, and what is the meaning of probing in qualitative research interviews? One of the most unstructured interviews is the qualitative research interviews, and it relies heavily on probes. So, what is probing? How does it happen? And what can examples be? Now, how do you report on the point of theoretical saturation? That was also discussed in the video segment. Now, in qualitative research interviews, data collection and data analysis happen simultaneously. I think that is another feature of qualitative research that is so very different from quantitative studies, where clearly data analysis will only happen after the data collection is over. But in qualitative research, both of these happen together and simultaneously, and data analysis can enrich the process of data collection if you can understand and go back to week 4 and week 7 of what I have discussed. Now, this is an example of a research design which I had taken from Dr. Shraddha's doctoral dissertation, where she has explained the process of research design that she followed. And why I chose this is because out of all of the scholars who have cleared their doctoral degree under my supervision, Dr. Shraddha was possibly the only one to adopt a purely qualitative research design. So you can see how this goes. Identification of a research problem would lead to formation of key constructs. Now, what is the meaning of a construct? If we go back to my segment in week 1, you would understand what it means. Key research questions. Key research questions would lead to selection of data collection sites, physical interviews. Now you can see what I meant by data collection and data analysis happening simultaneously. It is a iterative process. Now, the data analysis would then lead to the identification of codes, discussions, and implications. So this was a typical framework of a qualitative research design that she adopted. Now, moving to week 7, which was the week past, there is where I had spoken in detail on qualitative data analysis. Now, here also, learners, I would like to make clear that qualitative data analysis has major streams of thoughts. So many interesting varieties which you can think of, which you can creatively assimilate into your research projects. But once again, due to the shortage of time, I had included two of the most prominent methods of qualitative data analysis, namely grounded theory and case studies. Now, in grounded theory, I had explained the process of grounded theory, what is meant by grounded theory, what is not meant by grounded theory. I think the supplement had concentrated on Sudhabi Roy's editorial in the Academy of Management Journal, where he had clearly mentioned that what grounded theory is not. And I would expect all learners to read through the supplement, if not the editorial. If you read the full editorial, that's great. That would give you an understanding of how to not use grounded theory. And why this editorial is important, because you need to understand that qualitative data is vast. Qualitative data can be very messy. Qualitative data is very detailed, but you need to make sense, you need to make a structure, and you also need to be creative with this kind of data. So, in order to understand how you would deal with this data, you should also be able to appreciate what these methodologies of analysis are. So that's how the entire video segment and the supplement had concentrated on. I had discussed the process of coding, which grounded theory religiously follows, and how you would maintain reliability and validity using grounded theory as a method of analysis. Similar treatment was done to case studies also in week 7. Now, to give you an example of grounded theory, if you would refer to my video segment, and basically, I would like you to go back to my supplement. My supplement contains different processes from the doctoral dissertation of Dr. Shraddha, because her entire doctoral dissertation had utilized grounded theory as a method of analysis. So, for example, the video supplement introduces you to the process of memoing. Now, memoing is something that is very, very dear to qualitative data analysis, and grounded theory researchers follow it very, very thoroughly. So, what is meant by a memoing and how does a memo look like? I had given you an excerpt in the form of a table. Now, what is meant by open codes? What is meant by axial and selective codes? The entire process was explained by a diagram in the supplement, once again from the dissertation of Dr. Shraddha. So learners who are interested to go through grounded theory should basically look at the supplement very thoroughly. Now, there's something else that I would like to mention here, that very often qualitative researchers take the help of softwares like NVivo and Atlas TI to make sense of the data that they gather. While softwares are very, very critical, crucial in helping you build a structure to the kind of analysis, qualitative researchers should be very careful to maintain a balance between structure and the overall creativity of the storyline that they are trying to build. What do I mean by this? Structure is where you are making sense of data, but qualitative research will always want a researcher to move above the data. That how do you interpret and how do you present the richness of data? That is the heart of all qualitative research, and that is what these video lectures and supplements have focused on. Similarly, in case studies, we have looked at the process of a case study research, how case study is one of the best examples of building a balance between deductive and inductive research, what is meant by a research question and a research proposition in a case study, and how do you follow the process in a case study. Now, at the heart of a case study are the multiple designs that a case study uses. So you can have a single case study, you can have a multiple case study, and case studies are very complex and they are utilized for extremely complex phenomena that you would like to study. Why? Because this is a singular research where you can have multiple units of analysis. which I have discussed in the video segment and have also provided in the supplement. What is the meaning of multiple units of analysis? Meaning individual, group, and organizational at the same time. Now, in case studies, I had also introduced you to something called as a replication logic. What is the meaning of a replication logic? Now, if you undertake multiple case studies are like multiple experiments. So, sampling logic is introduce more and more respondents into the overall sample. Now, whereas replication logic is to replicate the same phenomena or the same causal linkage again and again and again in order to understand whether a relationship exists or not. Replication logic also is of two types, literal and theoretical replication. Now, here, once again, I give you example from a doctoral dissertation of a doctoral scholar of mine, Dr. Sangamitra Brahma, whose research thesis was on knowledge management process enablers in the context of privately held mid-tier management institutes and B schools in eastern India, and she had basically looked at the states of Bengal, Odisha, and Jharkhand. So, if I'm looking at literal replication, what is she taking? What? Please go back to the understanding of literal replication in the video segment and in the supplement. So, literal replication for her was fully autonomous or university level, privately run mid-tier management institutes or B schools in eastern India. Now look at theoretical replication. She had introduced two levels of theoretical replication. What is theoretical replication? You are slowly moving away from autonomy. So, what is this? State university affiliated but operationally autonomous, privately run mid-tier management institutes or B schools in Eastern India. What is the second level of theoretical replication? These are state university affiliated, privately run mid-tier management institutes or B schools in Eastern India. Now, so did we understand literal replication is where you will find what you want to find in the phenomena that you are studying in a case study. So that for her was fully autonomous or university level privately run mid-tier institutions. Now, theoretical replication is where you would go to your disconfirming cases, meaning to a zone or to an organization where you may not be able to find what you want to find, but with a proper reason. So that is how theoretical replication was done in case 2 and case 3. So if you have to understand replication logic vis-a-vis sampling logic, I think for all learners who would want to undertake case studies in their research project, they also need to go back to the drawing board and read a small book which was written by Robert Ian on case study research. The full reference has been provided in my supplement, and it is one of the finest books on case studies where everything has been very simply explained. So please understand the difference in how you conduct multiple experiments vis-a-vis how you would induct respondents for a sample. So multiple experiments, very similar to multiple case studies, and that is the reason why the logic is called as replication logic. Now, if I look at concluding thoughts on the varieties of topics that were introduced to you in the past so many weeks, now the first question comes to my mind that why would you undertake mixed method research? Now, the only thing that is helpful in understanding this question is the cone of validity as described by Bhattacharjee, that in a single research you are establishing both internal and external validity. But as I said, the Q square methodology is also a huge challenge in terms of understanding, in terms of constructing the research design, time, energy, and resource. But the results drawn from such kind of research are extremely important, and they help go a long way in understanding how future research can be undertaken in the area. Now, always remember, learners, that the start of a good research is a topical problem, a relevant problem that is not only important to you, but that is also important to the academic world around you. And the entire design of research should focus on the examination of the problem that you have identified for yourself. So, Given my own leanings, I have had a variety of experience of doing both qualitative and quantitative research. But at heart, I began my research journey with qualitative research. So that is how all of these weeks I have been talking about issues that interest me, issues that are very interesting to me, and I thought I would share with all of you. I hope all of these lectures and supplements help you build a good, credible research project and you come back to us or to the academic community with a topical problem and a sound research design. Once again, dear learners, thank you so much for your attention and being a part of this MOOC course on quantitative and mixed method research. Namaskar.
Namaskar, dear learners. I am Dr. Sumita Mishra, Dean KIIT School of Management, here with you again. And this is our final segment of the Swayam MOOC course on quantitative and mixed method research. By my educational background, I have done my master's from Tata Institute of Social Sciences with a PhD degree from MDI Gurgaon. This course has been a result of my collaboration and passion with my senior colleague, Dr. R.N. Subudhi, and this is an area which has always excited both of us because research methodology is one of the most ever changing domains of knowledge that you will ever encounter. This is a landscape which is always witnessed new different methodologies and new different vistas of learning. So here we are with you in the last week of this course, and with me I have my senior colleague Dr. Subudhi, and over to Subudhi sir.
Thanks, Sumita madam. Hi all. We are so happy that you have been with us since last 8 weeks, and we have got so many videos. We are quite hopeful you must have enjoyed, and we are looking forward to listening to your feedback, which will be very valuable for us because we propose to have more such courses. And while preparing the courses in future, your feedback will be really, really very useful for us. And in case of any doubt, query, don't hesitate, you can ask to us. Thank you. Happy learning.